I appreciate that. Thank you very much, all my panelists. They are here, they're coming with a rich experience. We all know that climate risk is posing a risk and it's making a stark difference in our life. The rate at which the glaciers are melting, with already at a mark of 1.1 degree temperature rise, um, it's no surprise that the next zoonotic disease is going to haunt us within a decade or maybe 2 decades, which was the earlier one was in 1920 and we witnessed in 2020. Idea and objective is to ensure that when we are a part of the problem, as we hear and we heard our panelists talk about, we have to be the part of the solution. And three of our panelists, they've worked extensively in the direction and dimension of how to enable technology and bridge the gap of skill. Because the way the investment is coming in the space of sustainability, the data shows that almost $35 trillion investment has already came in. And more investment is coming in to solve the problem. But one thing which is very important and which I hear it very clearly, that we have the solution, but the scale and the speed is something which is very, very important for us. And as we move forward, more and more young minds are going to develop that solution, which is going to help us navigate around the problem and look around the solution so that we address it adequately, efficiently, at the same speed and scale which we are talking about and which we heard in the previous panel. At this moment, I'll just take 2 more minutes in terms of talking about our panelists. At this juncture, I would like to welcome Richa Arora. She's from eCube Investment Advisor, and she's coming with a vast experience in terms of how the advisory and investment firm can take right decisions to enable the technology and the right mind and bridge that gap in an accelerated form. And the work which they've done is something which is very significant, and I'm personally knowing them since last half a decade. The amount of the scale of work which they have put in place. We also have Mr. Jay Asundi, who is coming from a research background, and he's coming from the technology research where they are trying to enable and bringing artificial intelligence in every facet of the work which they do to accelerate the work towards the climate change resilience and adaptation, and how to move the traction around the corporates, enlightening that understanding and disseminating that understanding, their mind and thought process, so that we take that to the next level. We also have Mr. Sridhar. Whenever I enter at your airport, especially Terminal 2, and many of you must have witnessed that, that's one of the benchmark. And the type of work which is happening in terms of managing the resources is truly, truly remarkable. So I welcome you all. Thank you very much for being here, and thanks Nasscom for inviting me and representing TVS Motors. We are also looking forward for many of such young minds who are sitting here to collaborate with them and bring some change in the dimension of e-mobility over a period of time. I have a few questions for you. To start with, first, Ms. Richa, the question is for you. Can you share the insight into how ESG stewardship services contribute to bridging the skill gap in the climate tech sector?
Thanks, Thakur, for your opening remarks. Very, very valid. And I thought it may just be useful to just briefly talk about what eCube does so that there's a context. I think the previous panel was all about startups, and eCube, we work a lot with corporates and large investors in terms of their investee companies to help them with their ESG strategies. I think when it comes to skilling, there are broadly, you could say, two cohorts which we address. One is what you can say the folks at the operations level. There are the feet on street. There are the value chains and the SMEs which are a part of that. And we have a vertical which is all about capacity building, which is in partnership with FICCI, set up very recently, which is to address this whole issues of skilling of SMEs to support the value chains of a very large organization, supply chain coming under focus. Also to kind of just say that we started this when ESG was not even a known acronym in India about 4 or 5 years ago, and just to be mixed up with ECG. So we've had people say, oh, ECG. So in some ways, yes, it's an ECG of your sustainability efforts. So I think skilling in that space down the line is absolutely critical to moving forward the agenda. But if you go to the other end, the other cohort, that is at the apex level in an organization, and that's really the boards and the CXOs. Because let's admit it, in large corporates, the agenda is set from the top, and boards, the role which they play in driving business strategy, in terms of giving the direction and guidance to organizations. There is the need for ESG to come into that discussion and narrative in a more cohesive manner. So in our interactions with, and barring, I think, the boards of, a handful of boards of large organizations, institutions which have been on this journey for quite some time, there is, of course, the awareness about ESG because everyone's talking about ESG. But what really are the things which impact the business? How do you look at it from the business end of things, and how do you integrate into business, is something where even board skills require a lot of work. And we work with boards in the area of whether it's climate tech, whether it's in terms of regulatory, whether it's in terms of impact of climate change, so it really depends on the organization and where they are in their journey and what industry they are in. And to drive home, I think the key point that ultimately it's got to be integrated into the board's business strategy approach, and then it gets deployed further in the organization. Now, of course, you can't leave everything to the board. You've got to have the via media of it being implemented in the organization, which is where the CXOs and board work which we do is in tandem, because you need that execution at the management level for ESG to get integrated more and more into the organization. So what we do at the apex level, and what we do at the ground level, and I think all of us recognize here that sustainability, ESG is not a one-time effort. It's not a few set of actions. It's an ongoing journey like business. And over a period of time, all this work in the skilling space will bear fruit, whether it's we talk about climate tech or we talk about any other area. So that's briefly about what we do there.
Wonderful. And I was just going through the facts via some of the reports which is released by World Economic Forum. It clearly indicate the pace at which the green economy is taking a shape, or the investment which is coming up in solar, wind, the blue economy. Close to 85 million jobs are going to get created, right? And those will get unfilled if we have a right talent, right ways and method by which we groom people in that direction. So it's very, very important. I mean, the role which you play in terms of advising people, coaching them, and holding them. And I'm on the same board. Being in a CXO, it's very tough for me to educate my board of directors when I interact with them. The challenge remains intact. And hats off to you. I mean, the level of diligence in terms of putting the right word in front of them when you go and talk to them about sustainability.
Absolutely. I think communication is so important in this space. I mean, there's nothing like over communication. And I think boards have become more receptive. They realize that this is not something which they can leave to chance. And so I think most boards are keen to learn, to kind of move forward. But it's a bit like how it was 15 years ago with digital. You know, boards wanted to do digital, so to say, but they didn't know how to go about it. But today, boards are a lot more comfortable with digital. So we do a bit, but I think there's a lot to be done really by everybody. The ESG ecosystem, I always say, is a very vast one. It requires collaboration, you know, working together, and sometimes there are challenges on that front also, because there are different interests, and you know, there are different wheels within wheels, as always in things which require not just organizations but even countries to kind of work together. So yeah, the scale of the challenge is all of us know, and we've all got to kind of push ahead with whatever we can contribute and do.
Amazing, very nice. So we'll move to Dr. Jay. Being in a research, technology-driven research agency, science is the solution for everything. This we keep hearing. And especially the type of work which we do, I have a specific question for you, that how AI driving innovation solution for the climate challenge, in your experience, how it is transitioning effort to transform the entire journey in terms of acceleration of the pace, the width, and the depth in terms of implementation. What's your view on that?
Thank you, Thakur. Thank you for having me here. Clearly, I come from a very lateral perspective here. We've been doing a lot of work on clean energy transition, looking at clean air, all these are immediate issues that we are all talking about, but also we are starting to look at it from a broad, long-term sustainability. When we look at AI, we look at it as a tool. I mean, it is a means to get to a particular end. The narrative so far has largely been around carbon and around temperature. But that is not the only marker of climate, right? We also have to look at diversity of our ecosystems. We also have to look at water availability. I think we all talk about it, but there's no way to measure that because it's a largely local phenomenon. So there are lots of these other measures that we have to start looking at. And I think the important thing is looking at the sustainability of the ecosystem that you are trying to reside in. What works, and I think the previous panel did talk about that, right? What works in North America or works in Northern Europe may be different from Sub-Saharan Africa, different from India, and even within India also we see wide differences from the Northeast, North, South, East, West. So now the question becomes, how do you use a tool, which is AI, to drive sustainability in each of these respective areas? So now there are obviously the obvious solutions, right? The simple obvious solutions is how do I use AI to identify suitable, let's say, rooftops. I mean, very specific example, suitable rooftops for installing rooftop solar panels so that it reduces our consumption of coal. We talked about that already, right? How do we reduce and make sure distributed renewable energy can work? Now, the answer is different for a corporate, answer is different for an individual customer. So that's a very obvious way in which AI can be used. The next way in which the next solution on the AI front could be in terms of coming up with identifying land parcels where we are going to now install solar panels, install wind, because now we also need these mega, or I wouldn't call them mega, I would say large scale renewable energy solutions for the kinds of work that we need. Now, we have to be very conscious of the fact that a piece of land that may seem as unused, unusable, could actually house certain kinds of biosystems, ecosystems, and we have to be very careful about that. And so, which is why now we are already starting to talk about agro-photovoltaics. That is, in the existing agricultural lands, can we use solar panels that can increase yields of the current farmers, at the same time use the energy coming from these photovoltaics. So that is the second level. The third level, of course, is when we talk about AI being used to discover new materials, right? We also had that discussion, new battery materials, new materials to do the kinds of things that we want to do. And I think that's where the expansiveness of AI could come in, because we can also start exploring biosystems. Can we use biological systems to do the kinds of work that we want to do, either in terms of waste management, waste recycle, recovery? So there are a whole host of applications that now each of these areas are in, of course, different what are called technology readiness levels. There was a talk about hydrogen being produced, but at the pilot stage, which means the TRL would be something like a 2, 3, or a 4. We have not got to the point where we are saying that, okay, this is how I will scale it to larger solutions. So I think there are a whole host of solutions. I think it's important that the people who are working on these technologies also keep in mind the life cycle assessments of some of these things. The life cycle assessment is the most important way, because we do not want to create a problem for the future. It is something. And this is where the conundrum lies. Most businesses run on the quarterly life cycle, quarterly reporting, while sustainability is not a quarterly phenomenon. We have to think about it from a decadal or a multi-decadal time frame. And I think that's where the real friction lies. And I think that's where research can play a role in identifying these life cycle assessments, coming up with what are feasible solutions. And I think last but not the least is this whole issue of technology assessment. Whenever a new technology comes up, the first question that you ask is this for real? And if it is for real, is it sustainable? I think these are two questions that should be asked whenever we come in, and I think that's the way we should take this forward.
Very true, and also the factor of scalability. Whenever we talk about, in true sense, sustainability fulcrum in the entire spectrum, advice, which we call it process, technology, is incomplete until unless there is a person or a human touch in it. Aspiring to accomplish something is only possible when the execution happen in a right way. And that's where my third panelist, who has taken into account advice and technology, both of it, in terms of implementing and setting a benchmark. And I was hearing your conversation, the type of the engagement, the action you have taken at Terminal 2, take it to the level at which is an international benchmark. I would want to understand, as a sustainability lead at Bangalore Airport, how do you see the airport role in shaping a more sustainable future, sustainable aviation, and also how you are planning to achieve the goals which you have set for yourself, and where you want to see Bangalore Airport in a decade's time?
Thank you. Good afternoon, all. Thank you for giving an opportunity to be part of you today for this interaction. We have set ourselves a sustainability vision for 2030, touch lives by nurturing a sustainable future through the initiatives that drive economic, social, and environmental transformation. When we set ourselves a very specific vision, we have also carved out 6 key strategic pillars to drive this: water stewardship, net zero emissions, community aligned noise management, sustainable procurement, sustainable mobility, and circular economy. And we have also have 3 core foundational values: corporate social responsibility, behavioral change, and compliance. Having said this, if I have to just give some of these important initiatives, all initiatives are important, but within this time frame, we will just put up something which has milestones which we have recently achieved, and also what we have set out for your second question, like for 2030, what type of aspirations and the initiatives in which we are working. Water stewardship, when I say a particular key strategic pillar, today we are a water positive company. Our watershed improvement activities includes both what is inside the premises, airport's 4,000 acre campus, as well as in the community. And we replenish 2.36, our water positive index is 2.36, which means more than double we replenish. We have also now, in addition to that, started recovering almost 1/3 of our potable water requirement from our in-house rainwater harvesting systems. We aspire to come near zero, near 100%, which will make near zero of the BWSSB water intake in the next few months. That will give a lot of 2 MLD of further water to the community. The BWSSB water can get the source diversification, so that we will not only water positive, over and above that, we will run with our own rainwater harvesting systems. The water conservation part, when we take it, we use a lot of IT-enabled systems also, because we have a huge landscape close to around 1,000 acres. Not only the Terminal 2, what as passengers you're all patronizing and motivating and supporting us, and also the invisible part of it, of the remaining several hundred acres of the green landscape, the type of species we have developed that as a biodiversity hotspot, with the type of species, not only the local, Mediterranean, and a lot of international species into it, making a larger biodiversity. Like in the Terminal 2, what you have seen, all those things gets nurtured in the nurseries, and then it gets, get relocated into the places where it is intended. All the water feeding is IoT enabled, and it sends the moisture and the temperature and evapotranspiration rate, and the water is fed through that. And that water is not a fresh water, it's treated sewage water, not only our own sewage treated water, and also we buy the city treated sewage for all the entire landscape to avoid the fresh water thing. When it comes to the net zero emission, we are part of the Airport Council International's carbon accreditation program. The level 4+ is the highest, which very few airports in the globe have achieved it. We are one of the pioneering airports which have got it. What does it mean for us? We are leading towards net zero from our current status of carbon neutral, which we have achieved in 2017. Our scope 2 emissions are already zero because we use 100% renewable electricity, combination of both on-site and off-site purchases, combination of solar, hydel, and small hydel and the wind power plants. And we have, again, the IT-enabled solutions to track, monitor, and also to have the real-time monitoring. Because we have, the time is ticking here, so I will only touch upon one more thing. While there are a lot of good things like water positive, net zero emissions leading to carbon neutral, the green landscape, what we have, the type of energy efficiency, the first LED power runway in the country, greater than 95% of conversion of LED, electricity lights in the campus, and also the type of society activities in where we do it for the education part to make it a holistic thing. We have also set ourselves a very toughest journey of taking this to the supply chain. Whatever the encouragement you are giving, the motivation you are giving, the successes which are motivating us, if you don't take it to our extended community, the partners, the supply chain, I don't think it will be a very credible journey. So that is why we have taken up a very toughest journey of bringing the entire ecosystem into this journey, handhold them, bring them into our ecosystem, and then support them in the sustainability initiatives. We have launched a separate vertical pillar, sustainable procurement, taking the guidance of ISO 20400 and also implementing these initiatives. One more thing I'll just touch upon, the waste part of it. We are in the verge of completing in-house integrated solid waste management plan, which is also has the capacity to take a part of community waste nearby, so that we will generate biogas converted to CNG for the internal consumption, and the biodigested sludge converted as a manure and used for not only for our own landscape and also to the society part of it. So like this, many initiatives we are planning, the sustainable transformation journey. We want to bring in the behavioral change in the stakeholders. There also we are taking the gamification part to the technology support. The aviation part, the most toughest, the scope 3 emissions, while we have planned to become near zero in every line item, we have a challenge on the sustainable aviation, the question which you have asked. We are working very closely on the sustainable aviation fuel and the research community on the green hydrogen part of it with the airlines community. So it's a very collaborative effect. To sum it up, it all needs a consistent thing, like our fellow panelists had said, it's all some certain things or decade-long things. It all comes with throughout a consistent approach. In COVID, our management had an easy choice of putting this on back burner to work only on the challenges faced in front of them. But they didn't take that particular easy choice. They took the toughest choice of allowing us, you work for the future, we take for the current problems. So that type of critical times also, whatever possible, if we continuously do it. For example, I took it, the COVID part of it, that helps us. Otherwise, it put us back by 3-4 years. So today, that strong management commitment had helped us today, because many of the new strategy and achievements we did, course corrections during the COVID time, we have been given a free hand to think for the future. Management took care of the current problem at that point of time. Our humble learning, which we always request people to consider, is whatever may be the toughest headwinds we face, try and see this sustainable journey, whatever way, as individuals and corporates, as a society, what we do. Let's not derail it at any point of time. The pace may slow down for the challenges with the headwinds, but the journey should continue. Thank you very much.
Yeah, perfect. So we still have some time, and I would want a few of my next questions considered to be rapid fire, right? And still aligned to sustainability, climate change, resilience, adaptation, technology, innovators who are sitting here. And my question here is, again, in next 1 decade, and I will again start with you, Mr. Sridhar, and I'll go in a reverse order again. In next 1 decade, what are those next few things which are there in the pipeline you are trying to experiment? As a customer when I'm flying, or as a flyer when I'm flying and coming to your airport, I'll witness. What are those top 3 things which you would like to highlight and indicate, either as a problem statement so that all of these innovators take it back as a challenge and come back to you as a solution, or something which you've already tried and tested, you would like to roll it out?
I'll take the 3 points. One is, whatever the journey we are doing it, bring our entire community and supply chain along with that. Drive the sustainable transformation, behavioral change, try and do a bit of our contribution, and convert the stakeholders as brand ambassadors of sustainability. So we are driving that initiative from an individual stakeholder level, not as an organizational drive to KPI purpose, so that while we focus on the corporate part of it, this should start from home. So this is the type of main transformational program we have taken. And one more, the one which always we used to talk also like is, toughest journey which we feel is to have this supply chain also fully aligned to it, do our bit to them, handhold them and support. While these entire 6 key strategic pillars which I explained are all part of the 2030 priorities, becoming net zero emissions 2030. But one thing I would like to touch upon where we have a biggest challenge, where we need the entire research support, which we are trying across the globe, and the national part of is on the scaling up on the sustainable aviation fuel, the type of research, and then how we equip. We are committed to at least 10% SAF by 2030. but there is a supply chain which we need to develop, and also the green hydrogen part of it, how we can get into this type of a research oriented new technologies, so that we stay ahead of the curve, and so that we can implement these latest and new technologies as it evolves for our stakeholders and to the passengers and to the aviation community. So these are all the challenges where we expect help, and we are collaborating with the larger research community. There are solutions, but the scaling is some current challenges which we are facing. Collectively, we have to find a solution.
I'm sure the person sitting next to you would help you in some sort of a research, and also there are some innovators here. So I'll come to you, Dr. Jay. We all are smelling the coffee. Half of the people in the morning I called in Delhi, they are saying that we are in a smoke chamber, right? And you have done some high-tech research around air pollution mitigation, some of the programs which you are trying to work on. Would you like to give a quick glimpse around what is happening around that technology intervention towards the air pollution mitigation?
Very, very pertinent question. I was in Delhi yesterday and day before, so I sampled the smoke. You know, it is what you would call a community action problem. This is not something where you put out a silver bullet and the problem gets solved. Just to give the perspective, Los Angeles, right, the country within the US, very rich country, it took them almost 20 years to solve a lot of the air quality problems around LA, and they're continuing to work on it. It's not that the problem is solved and now they have to look at it somewhere else. So with that perspective in mind, I think I'm sure we can work on it a little harder. The simple thing is that this is not linear, right? All of us are very used to linear systems where we say, oh, if I do X, I should see a certain amount of Y. So when I do delta X, I should see delta Y in terms of response. But these response functions are not linear. So from that perspective, I think there are three things that need to be done. One is measure, monitor. Make sure that you're absolutely clear on that. Second is figuring out good models to understand what the response function looks like. Because you may say that, oh, I put up these smog towers, see results in the local neighborhood, but what is the broader perspective? I think that you have to be very careful about. So model the system very carefully. And last but not the least, make sure that you build the policy mechanisms in place to deal with some of these problems on a long-term basis. Don't think of it more in terms of a committee that will solve the problem for this year or next year, but how are we going to deal with it for the next 10 years, which means building capacity in institutions that will be able to handle this over the longer term. Those are sort of very generic pieces, but unfortunately, that's the hard work that we have to do.
Wonderful, very nice. And just quickly for the next 30 second to 45 second, Ms. Richa, there are a lot of innovators sitting here, and you do guide them, support them, nurture them, and build their capability, competency in width and depth both. What are those wise words for them in terms of, so that they can come back to you and get some guidance from eCube in terms of how to scale their thought process or their innovation for solving the key issues around the climate change?
So, typically we talk about this whole aspect of comply, compete, and lead. And I think when you're talking to the innovators in the room, you're talking about creating those, not done before solutions and doing them well. Having a use case for it. I think in the previous panel spoke about scale up. How are you able to scale up those solutions? I think that is very important. So not coming from just the basic mode, but going towards a spectrum of scale up. I think the second aspect in this is, and it gets missed out a lot in startups, is the cultural piece. When you talk about the culture of the organization, it has a bearing on the outcomes and the outputs, on the ways of working, which in turn has an impact as to how quickly the startup is able to grow. This challenge actually you see not just in startups, it's a challenge even for large organizations. So anything to do with innovation, anything to do with ESG requires that mindset of cultural transformation. And that requires the promoters and the people who are creating this to be able to communicate right. I think as in everything, there is no such thing as over communication. So communicating within their setups, when they're selling their solutions, when they're selling solutions for scale up are the two things I would say
Wonderful, very nice. So what I just am hearing, and this is something which is very important, and I'm trying to culminate everything, that if we have to drive solutions, solutions should be around process, people, technology, integration of all these three. And also when there is a will, there is a way. And each one of you can act like a guiding light, ambassador of change. And we are looking forward for many more to join hand and put a hand on the deck to solve the problem. Because when we are part of the problem, what I hear, we have to be the part of the solution. And with the collective force, I think we can bring some change. And that small change can add up to a big change over a period of time. But again, I would call it as a call for an action, that speed and scale both are important to solve this mammoth issue which we have posed or brought at our doorstep. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Sridhar, Dr. Jay, Ms. Richa. Thank you very much for your great insight and guidance for the team, and also the nice work which you have put in this dimension of climate change. Thank you,
On that
Nasscom.
note.